fact that the human being is been made for both abodes. Like he's salihun for both abodes. He's an appropriate creature for both of these two abodes, the abode of this world and the abode of the next world. So he says, رضي الله عنه: الإنسان من بين الموجودات مخلوق خلقة تصلح للدارين وذلك أن الله تعالى قد أوجد 3 أنواع من الأحياء، نوع لدار الدنيا وهو الحيوانات، ونوع لدار الآخرة وهو الملأ الأعلى، ونوع لدارين وهو الإنسان. So he says that the human being amongst all created things is a creature that was created for both of the abodes. And that is because if Allah has created 3 types of living beings. The first type is created solely for this abode, the abode of the lower abode, Dar al-Dunya. And these are the animals, hayawanat. The second type is created for the immaterial world. So the first for the material world, the second for the afterlife. And these are the mala al-a'la. This is the highest assembly. And then the third type is for both abodes, which is the human being. فالإنسان واسطة بين جوهرين وضيع وهو الحيوانات ورفيع وهو الملائكة. So the human being is a means between these two essential types. A low type, and those are the animals, and a exalted type or a high type, and those are the angels. فجمع فيه قوى العالمين وجعله كالحيوانات في الشهوة البدنية والغذاء والتناسل والمهارشة والمنازعة وغير ذلك من أوصاف الحيوانات، وكالملائكة في العقل والعلم وعبادة الرب والصدق والوفاء ونحو ذلك من الأخلاق الشريفة. And then he made the animals for this lower abode. He put us between these two, and so the animals have bodily appetite. They need food, nourishment, drink. They were created for procreation. Also, they have muharasha and munaza'a. So they're creatures that will vie and fight amongst each other. They'll quarrel, and like animals do. The animal world is a bloody world in reality. If you actually look at the animal world, I think Tennyson has an interesting take on that. So, and also all these other aspects that are related to the bestial realm, to the realm of beasts. I just was watching my cat try to catch a fly. Right? So, I mean, the poor fly, what did the fly do to the cat? But that's the bestial world. And then when humans behave like beasts, they end up doing similar things. They invade other people's lands. They take over people's homes. They bulldoze them, or they draw people into a war that they want, but the other group might not want, but they draw them into it just so they can crush them, right? And they'll kill lots of people and not really care. I mean, one of the things about the animal kingdom is at least, when they kill out of necessity, generally. I mean, some cats are pretty cruel. There's a theory that they're evil animals because they will kind of just for sport, and then they like to play with the animal that their prey. But generally, animals will kill because they need to kill, but humans, it's a different story. So he says, so then there's the angels, so like the angels in intelligence, in knowledge, in worshiping their Lord, in sincerity, in their obedience and loyalty, and things like that, from noble qualities, from these higher, the akhlaq al-sharifa, these noble characteristics. So now he's going to go into what is the wisdom in that. Like, why would Allah create a creature that has both these qualities in them? They're murakkab in that way, they're compounded. So he says, أنه تعالى لما رشح لعبادته وخلافته وعمارة أرضه وهيأهم مع ذلك لمجاورته في جنته اقتضت الحكمة أن تجمع له قوتان. So when the exalted, basically when he put forward this candidate for his worship and his vicegerency, his stewardship, and the cultivation of his earth, he prepared him with those things for being in his presence in the afterlife, in the Jannah. So all of that, the wisdom, the divine wisdom behind it, then resulted in bringing these two powers together, these two powers, the قوة الحيوانية والقوة الملكية. فإنه لو خلق كالبهيمة معرًا عن العقل لما صلح لخلافة الله تعالى وعبادته. Had he been created like a beast, denuded of rational thought, of intelligence, then he would not have been, he would not have warranted the khilafah, to be the steward, or to worship him out of willing, in other words, out of free will. كما لم تصلح له ذلك البهائم, just as the animals themselves are not, they don't warrant that. They're not, it's not appropriate for them. ولا لمجاورته ودخول جنته, nor for there to be in that divine presence in the afterlife and in his paradise. ولو خلق كالملائكة معرًا عن الحاجة البدنية لم يصلح لعمارة أرضه. And had he created them like angels, denuded of any bodily needs, then they would not have been appropriate to cultivate the earth, because part of the earth's cultivation is farming and agriculture. If you don't need food, then you're not going to farm the world. You're not going to do those things. You're not going to build. If you have no bodily needs, if you don't have cold, then you're or need protection from heat, then you're not going to create buildings that you need to live in. So all of the imara of the art, because that's one of the reasons Allah created the human being, was to cultivate the earth. It's not simply for ibadah. Like he gives these reasons in the Quran, and he'll get into this in the chapter where he talks about why لِأَجْلِ مَا خُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ وَأُوجِدَ الْإِنسَانُ. What are the reasons that the human being has been created? Because there are more than one. And that's why there are some people that are not worshiping Allah, but they are serving a purpose in the world. They're not, there's nothing sabah lala in Allah's creation. There's nothing that's pointless. So he says, وَكَمَا لَمْ تَصْلَحُ لِذَلِكَ الْمَلَائِكَةِ. So the angels weren't worthy of that. And when they questioned Allah, and it was su'al istifham la i'tirad, as they say, the mufassirun. It was a question to understand, not a question to challenge. So he said, إِنِّي أَعْلَمُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Allah said, I know what you do not know. The angels, when they said, أَتَجْعَلُ فِيهَا مَنْ يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَيُسْفِكُ الدِّمَاءَ. Are you going to put in the earth the one who sows corruption? So they were doing, according to some of the commentators, they were doing analogical reasoning with the jinn that were here before that did all this corruption, because they had free will also. So they were asking, are you going to do this again with these creatures with free will? So Allah says, إِنِّي أَعْلَمُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. I know what you do not know. فَاقْتَضَتْ الْحِكْمَةُ الْإِلَهِيَّةِ أَن تُجْمَعَ لَهُ الْقُوَّتَانِ. And so, for this reason, the divine wisdom required that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala join these two. إِذَا صَحَبَ التَّعْبِير. I mean, in Arabic, that's what it says. أن تجمع له القوتان. وفي اعتبار هذه الحكمة تنبيه على أن الإنسان دنيوي وأخروي. And in consideration of this divine wisdom, there is a notification, there's a calling to attention the fact that the human being is both worldly and otherworldly. وَأَنْهُ لَمْ يُخْلَقْ عَبَثًا. And he was not created in vain. There's nothing vain about our creation. كما نبه الله تعالى عليه بقوله أفحسبتم أنما خلقناكم عبثا وأنكم إلينا لا ترجعون. Do you think that we created you in vain and that you will not be returned to God? In other words, this is just a free lunch. There's not going to be any reckoning. There's no hisab. Do you think this is all? And this is what a lot of modern people think. They think that this is purely just a meaningless, I mean, they'll create existential meaning, like somebody like Camille Paglia or something will say, she talks about how important meaning is, but she's an atheist. So that meaning has to be generated, like the spider who generates his own abode from his body. He's the only creature, at least the ones that we know. I'm not sure some scientist has found some other creature maybe, but from the animals that we know, the spider creates his web from his own. And this is why Allah says that those who disbelieve, الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا اتَّخَذُوا بَيْتًا كَبَيْتَ الْعَنكَبُوتِ, right? Their house is like the spider web's house. So they build this web of meaning, but it's all from themselves. Is that وَإِنَّ أَوْهَنَ الْبِيُوتِ لَبَيْتُ الْعَنكَبُوتِ. This is the weakest of houses. In other words, if the meaning is based only on what you have generated, but in reality it's groundless, then it's a weak house. And this is why they go into deep existential crises when things happen that undermine their meaning. Right? They lose a sense of purpose. If somebody's hedonistic, the same. So they could live for pleasure, but then when the taste buds go, like Shakespeare says, the last stage, it's sans taste, sans sight, sans teeth, sans everything. There's nothing left. So at that stage, then the hedonism's gone, and then you have euthanasia. So they'll just kill them because there's no purpose for them. Like for us, somebody who in the end stage of life, they're being purified. That's all purification. The believers that go through those periods where, I saw Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, years he was there, and people were taking care of him, and he was luminous. Anybody that visited him, they were always amazed. He was luminous. And so it was a blessing for him to be in the world. Like Marabt al-Hajj, the same thing. For the last years of his life, he was, he slept on that khabta, was no bed sores, had an amazing scent. The people, everybody who visited him knows that. But he was being taken care of by the people. They wouldn't euthanize somebody like that, or any Muslim, because we don't believe that. Even our ulama wrote about the prohibition of euthanizing cats and dogs, let alone a human being. There are fatwas about that you should take care of sick cats and sick dogs. So it's a completely different worldview. So that's what he's telling us. Now this next section is really quite stunning. تَمْثِيلُ ذَاتِ الْإِنسَانِ وَتَصْوِيرُهُ. So this is going to be analogizing and conceptualizing the essence of the human being. So he's going to give us analogies in order for us to really understand through analogy, because this is one of the ways, one of the most important ways that human beings understand things is through analogies. Allah strikes many similitudes in the Quran, the amthal, and those are ways of driving home meaning. Even everything in the Quran about the afterlife is, according to Ibn Abbas, all of it they're just approximations. Because in reality, the afterlife is what nobody has ever seen or heard or never occurred to the human heart. So he said, لَيْسَ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا الْأَسْمَاءِ. That's Ibn Abbas said that. The only relationship that the afterlife has to this world is in the names. So قد ذكر الحكماء لذات الإنسان وقواه أمثالا صوروها. So the sages, wise people, philosophers, lovers of wisdom, have concerning the essence of the human being and the potentialities and faculties of the human being, they have struck similitudes and conceptualized them for us. فَتَمْثِيرُ كُلِّ مَا لَا يُدْرَكُ إِلَّا بِالْعَقْلِ يُتَصَوَّرُ لِلْحِسِّ. So everything that can only be understood by the intelligence, you have to conceptualize it with sensible things. That's one of the ways that the intellect can grasp what it is by giving analogies. So you see it's analogous to this. And that's why, one of the meanings of ta'bir, yu'abbiru, is to cross over, like a ma'bara is a bridge. So an analogy enables you to go from one point where you're not understanding something, and then through that analogy you cross the bridge into understanding it. So he says, ليقرب من الفهم, in order for it to approximate some understanding. فقالوا ذات الإنسان لما كان عالما صغيرا كما تقدم جرى مجرى بلد أحكم بناؤه وشيد بنيانه وحصن سوره وخطت شوارعه وقسمت محاله وعمرت بالسكان دوره وسلكت سبله وأجريت أنهاره وفتحت أسواقه واستعملت صناعه وجعل فيه ملك مدبر وللملك وزير وصاحب بريد وأصحاب أخبار وخازن وترجمان وكاتب وفي البلد أخيار وأشرار. So he's going to strike the similitude of a city. So he says, when the essence of the human being was in fact a microcosm, as was aforementioned, he says it can be looked at like a city whose the building of which was masterful. Its buildings were erected well. It is guarded by a wall surrounded. So it's surrounded by a wall. Like these are medieval towns because there was so much fear of invasion in most countries. So cities were built usually, like if you go to Fez today, there's still a wall around. If you go to Rabat, there's still a wall around the old city because they were fortified, either from foreign invasion or from people within the countries that wanted to challenge the rulers for whatever reason. So he's saying that they, with fortified walls, خُطَّتْ شَوَارِعُهُ, and its streets were set out, laid out, designed. وَقُسِّمَتْ مَحَالُّهُ, and then its different neighborhoods were divided. And then its homes were inhabited with residents, and its pathways and byways were laid out, and its rivers were also set to flow, and its marketplaces were opened, and its craftsmen were preoccupied, and there was placed in it a strategic king, a king that is mudabbir, like he's taking care of the affairs of the city. And the king has a minister, and he also has the person like who's in charge of communication. And then he has the mukhabarat, the people that are getting news and everything for him. And then he also has the treasurer, and he's got a dragoman, which is from the Arabic tarjuman, the same as a dragoman in English, which means translator, is from tarjuman. And in that city are good people and bad people. So this is his analogy for the human being. So now he's going to tell us what each one of these are. فَصُنَعُهَا هِيَ الْقُوَّةُ السَّبْعَ. So the craftspeople are the 7 faculties. التي يقال لها الجاذبة والماسكة والحاضمة والدافعة والنامية والغاذية والمصورة. So these faculties go back to, there's 2 ways to understand them. One is in relationship to the physical body. So you have the jadiba would be the assimilative, right? It's what when you take in food, for instance, it's what is pulling the food. The masika is the retentive faculty, so it's what retains the good of the food. The hadima is the digestive. The dafi'a is the excretory, so it's excreting what's not useful. The nabia is the growth, so it will build from the materials. It will actually build what's necessary. The ghadhiya is the nutritive. So it's what is going to take the nutrients in order to engender the energy that one needs. And then the musawwira is the intellectual faculty. So these are that's one. The second level is that each one of these also has, that's in relation to the body. They also have in relation to the soul. So they're both. You can look at them from a bodily perspective, you can look at them from the perspective. So from the perspective of the soul, the jadiba, which has, in this traditional, this comes out of a well-studied tradition. So the jadiba has the quwwa shahwiyya and the quwwa shawqiyya, the jadiba. So the quwwa shahwiyya are those things that we have, the appetites that we have, and then the shawqiyya are the things we desire. Like if it's sound, you desire good things like knowledge and upright behavior and things like that. It's also called quwwa nuzu'iyya. And then you have the masika, which is what the soul retains from its experiences and from its knowledge and things like that that's useful. And then it has the hadima, how it digests it, how it uses it. And then the dafi'a, what it rejects. So the quwwa dafi'a is related to the quwwa ghadabiyya, because you have dar al-mafsada wa jalb al-maslaha. So the quwwa jadhiba is for the jalb al-maslaha, the assimilative, the one that desires, yijdib, it's trying to bring something to itself. That has the quwwa shahwiyya. And then the quwwa ghadabiyya is related, the concupiscent soul is related to the jadhiba, and then the irascible soul is related to the dafi'a, because it repels what's harmful to the human being. And then the namiya is قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. It's what enables the soul to grow. And then the ghadiya is what's beneficial for the soul. يُغَدِّي soul. The Prophet ﷺ said about the wet nurse, he said, إِيَّاكُمْ وَالْحَمْقَى فَإِنَّهَا تُغَذِّي. Be careful about an unintelligent wet nurse, because she's giving more than just the food. Like, it's going to affect the intellect as well. And it's said that Fakhruddin al-Razi, one of the servants who wasn't very bright, suckled him. He was crying once, and so she just took him and suckled him. And his father found out. He was furious. So he knew this story of having. So whenever he would forget something, he would say, Masat al-Murda'. That was from the time I took some milk from that dullard. So those are the seven. So those are he's basically using them as an analogy for the craftsman, because they're the ones that do the work in the city, that do all the things that are necessary for the city to run. وَالْمَلِكُ الْعَقَلُ وَمَنْبَعُهُ مِنَ الْقَلْبِ. So the king is the heart, and the source of that, the king is the intelligence, and the source of that is the heart. So لَهُمْ قُلُوبٌ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ بِهَا. They have hearts, but they don't think with them. They don't reason with them. And that's why the heart is also, Imam al-Ghazali and others talk about that the heart is like a city, that, there's two kings fighting for it. So if the king of light gets in, then it has inshirah, it has all this opening. But if the dark one gets in, then it becomes dark. So, and then he says the minister is the quwwa al-mufakkira. So the quwwa al-mufakkira is basically the cogitative faculty of the human being. And so the minister, he's the one that really does a lot of the work of the king. And that's why he's called wazir, because yahmilu awzar al-malik. He bears the burdens of the king. And so, like, you have that. So, yeah, the president has the vice president, but the vice president ends up doing most of that work, right? So you always have, your faculty there, but then you need the one that helps you with that. He says that this is in the midbrain, which today probably would be seen as the neocortex. So it's actually the midbrain is more emotion. وصاحب البريد القوة المتخيلة ومسكنه مقدم الدماغ. So, and then he says the imaginative faculty. So this is This is the imagination. Because you had قوة المفكرة, قوة المتخيرة, قوة الحافظة, قوة الذاكرة, قوة الواهمة. These are faculties that the mind was divided into. So then he says, أصحاب الأخبار الحواس الخمس ومسكنه الأعضاء الخمسة. So the ones that get the news, like the spies, they're the five senses. So they're related to these five sensory organs that God's given us. And then the treasurer is al-quwa al-hafidha. This is the faculty of memory. وَمَسْكَنُهَا خَلْفَ الدِّمَاغ. And that's accurate now. We know that cerebellum is where the memory is located. It also is, if you look at it, it's in the shape of a cashew. And for those who are interested, there's a very interesting book by Scott Buchanan it's worth reading called The Doctrine of Signatures, which is the philosophy of, and it was very well developed in the Ottoman Empire. The physicians of the Ottomans gave a lot of consideration to this. So the doctrine of signatures is that God puts in the world his signature on things to indicate to us. So very often red, for instance, means danger in the natural world. If you see like a spider with red on it, yeah, bad. Snake with red on it, bad. And poison is often also red. So deadly nightshade. A lot of berries, these red berries are poisonous. But you have things like carrots, which are good for the eye. So if you cut a carrot and look at it, it looks like an iris. So that's a signature. The kidney bean would be good for kidneys. The cauliflower would be good for tumors. Walnuts are literally in a skull and look like the brain, the right and left side of the brain, right, with the corpus callosum between the two. So that was a traditional belief. So cashews were considered good for memory. So they look almost identical to the part of the brain where the memory is. And Imam Suyuti actually said cashews helped him. He had a phenomenal memory, and he said he ate a lot of cashews. So, although in Ta'lim al-Muta'allam, he tells us that one of the benefits for memory is 21 red raisins, which I think is just the exercise of remembering to do that every morning, right? Because people, if you try it, it's actually not. I've tried it. I've tried many memory things from these books, but if you do you'll have a hard time remembering, like to get 21 red raisins every morning. So, and then he says the tarjuman is the quwa natiqa. So the translator is the faculty, the rational faculty, the ability to produce language. وَأَرَتُهَا اللِّسَانِ, and its tool is the tongue. وَالْكَاتِبْ رَقُوَ الْكَاتِبَ وَأَرَتُهَا الْيَدِ. And then the katib, the one who writes for the king, is the faculty of writing, and its tool is the hand and the pen, obviously. وَسُكَّانُهَا الْأَخْيَارُ وَالْأَشْرَارُ. And so the residents of this city are both good residents and bad ones, just like you have in any city, good people and bad people. Hopefully the good people outweigh the bad people, but it can get to the point where there's more bad people than good people. I mean, there are places like that where you can't go because it's so bad. I mean, it's terrible, some of the places right now. Where there's just so many people that are thieves or murderers or rapists. And that often happens after war breaks down. So then he says that هي القوة التي منها الأخلاق الجميلة والأخلاق القبيحة. So these are the faculties that from them come good character, beautiful behavior, and bad character, ugly behavior. فكما أن الوالي إذا تولى وساس الناس بسياسة الله تعالى صار ظل الله في الأرض كما روي. So now he's going to, this is really interesting because what he's going to do is he's using, as he's taking these things that we understand at one level from the hadith and from the Quran, but he's going to apply them to the microcosm. So he's going to say, these meanings also apply to you. Like, Rumi said, when you read about Pharaoh in the Quran, don't see Pharaoh as some historical figure. See the Pharaoh in yourself. Like, see the Pharaoh in yourself. So he's going to use this. So now he says that if the governor is a good governor once he takes command, and he basically governs the people with God's government, siyasatillah, he will become the shade of God in the earth, just as it has been related from the Prophet ﷺ that governmental authority is the shade of God in the earth. And then it will be incumbent upon everyone. وَوَجَبَ عَلَى الْكَافَةِ طَاعَتُهُ. Everyone, it's incumbent upon them to obey him. كما قال الله تعالى وَأَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُوا الرَّسُولَ وَأُولِي الْأَمْرِ مِنْكُمْ. Obey God and obey the messenger and those put in power over you. So the Amr, the Prophet ﷺ, there was no word for government in the time of the Prophet. He didn't use any of the terms that later came to term. He called it هذا الأمر. So in the early period, it's always called هذا الأمر. لا نعطي هذا الأمر. And the Abbasids actually in their writings, that's what they called it. It was the Umayyads. It was the Abbasids that introduced the state. And it's ironic because the meaning that the Abbasids intended was not state. It was revolution. Because Dawla means to revolve. Dala yadulu, right? Mudawala. Dawala yudawilu. Tilka al-ayam nudawiluha bayna nas. We move it amongst the people. In other words, it revolves. And so the Dawla of the Abbasids was called a Dawlat al-Mubarakah, the blessed revolution. The Abbasid, the Umayyads called it Hadha al-Amr. That was what they could be based on the prophetic tradition. So now Dawla means state, but state in Latin is the opposite of Dawla. State is what's fixed, what doesn't change. It's status, like status quo. So the state is fixed. The Dawla is the idea. In Kuwait, to this day, over when you go into the palace of the Kuwaiti ruler, it says, "Law dama li ghayrika ma wasala ilayk." Like they put that over there as a reminder. If it had been continuous for the ones before you, it would have never reached you. In other words, it's a dawla. And the hakim, one of the beauties of the pre-modern world, I mean, this is, and I think some of the Muslim rulers still have this. Certainly like the kings, if you look at King Muhammad or King Abdullah, the people that come out of these monarchical traditions that are aware, they have their children, but most rulers don't think about these things anymore. They think they're going to be in power forever, right? So when I was in I got a tour by Bernasuddin in England. She's one of the people in the House of Lords, because they have elected lords or appointed by the government, and then they have lords that are inherit the position. So she took me with a group. We went into the throne room, and there was this amazing clock that was given by the French king to the English king. It was a few hundred years old, but it had the Grim Reaper on the top of the clock. And that wasn't a morbid thing. That was a reminder of the nature of time. And if you look at a lot of the early, because every city used to have these sundials, and on the sundials they would have these Latin phrases like carpe diem, seize the day, or you will be seized in one of these hours. So people, this is what they call momenti mori, right? It's a reminder of death. And it's something that pre-modern peoples, they had reminders of death around them. They wanted to be reminded of death because they didn't want to waste time. They wanted their lives to mean something. And so they had reminders of death. And that's why they had like skeletons to remind them. Dr. Cleary in his office had a skeleton. I mean, not a big one, but a small one, but it was on his desk. Right? It's a reminder that we're going to die, and to be aware of that is really important. So then he says, so obey Allah and obey the ruler, the messenger and the ruler, those ulil amri minkum. That's how I got to that. Hadha al-amr. وكذلك متى جعل العقل سائسا وجب على سائر القوة أن تطيعه. So when the reason becomes the governor, then it's an obligation on the rest of the faculties to obey it, to obey reason. Your quwwa ghadabiyya, your quwwa shahwiyya, all these different faculties should obey reason. وكما أن الله تعالى جعل الناس متفاوتين كما نبه الله تعالى عليه بقوله ورفعنا بعضكم فوق بعض درجات ليتخذ بعضهم بعضا سخريا. So Allah says, we have made you mutafawitun. So in other words, tafawut is these differences in degrees and otherwise. So hierarchy is a type of tafawut. Some people yatafawut yafutuhu fi shay. He surpasses, this person surpasses that person in his studies. He studies more. He gets up earlier. So there's always tafawut. And part of the modern world is this idea of leveling. This is something that was identified early on by people like Kierkegaard, that they wanted to level everything, to make everything mediocre. So buildings are no longer, if you look at modern buildings, there's nothing that really distinguishes them from other buildings. In the past, they were concerned about the aesthetic qualities. Now it's functional. Everything's functional. So he says that this tafawut amongst people, this differing in degrees, is indicated by Allah's word, like that we raised some of you over others. You could interpret that we privileged some of you over others, right? Darajats, by degrees. لِيَتَّخِذَ بَعْضُهُمْ بَعْضًا سُخْرِيًّا. So what's really interesting about sukhriya, right, with a dhamma, sikhriya, with a kasra, is to exploit. If it had sikhriya, it would be, but sukhriya is to use, to gain benefit from another, right? But sukhriya can easily become sikhriya. And this is where you get the problem in hierarchical cultures, and this is why, like the communists, because of all the abuse, they easily convince those people that are being exploited that, oh, these are evildoers, we need to get rid of them and overthrow them. And this all comes from bad siyasa, from bad governance, that people aren't, when you're in a position, when you're in a privileged position, what are you going to do with your privilege? Are you going to use it as a source of abuse, or are you going to use it for the betterment of what's around you, which includes bettering your society, not just bettering yourself or bettering your family, but bettering the society, doing things that are useful. So this is really important because it's so antithetical now to the modern worldview, where they disdain outwardly. I mean, you have all these Marxists right here living in $2 million homes and things like that, and then they vote for like Marxists. But then when the criminals start encroaching, right? It's a nice word, encroachment. When they start encroaching on them, suddenly, like over in San Francisco, when the billionaire gets stabbed, oh, better do something about crime, right? That's when the concern comes, when the billionaire gets stabbed, because suddenly it's affecting them. I mean, if you watch some of these people that are really disturbed about what's happening in academia right now, because you have all these teachers that are shocked by these students that are literally protesting in their classrooms. And they're so obtuse because they're not even aware that they created those students. And that's what Dostoevsky, that's why The Demons or The Possessed is such an important book to read, because that's what he shows. He's got this idiot who Stepan, he's just a complete idiot who has trained these kids that now have become nihilists. And when they turn on the society, he can't understand it. He created them. You created all these nihilistic, relativistic kids that don't recognize any type of authority. You destroyed authority by saying there's no such thing as authority. And then they become more susceptible to ideology than anybody else, because the worst type of authority is the tyranny of an ideology. That is the worst type of authority, is the tyranny of an ideology. And that's what happens. They take on these ideologies that are then, like, as Dostoevsky pointed out, they're really demons that have possessed them. The ideas are the demons. So you have all these people now out there doing all these crazy things in the name of their ideological tyranny, the tyranny over their mind, because they can't even think. They've never been taught to think or to really question. They think they're questioning, but they're not. So this is a really important point that he's making. And so then he says, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلَ قُوَّ النَّفْسِ مُتَفَاوِتًا. And in the same way, in your own selves, وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ. In your own selves, there are different faculties that have degrees in your own self. وَجَعَلَ مِنْ حَقِّ كُلِّ وَاحِدَةٍ أَن تَكُونَ دَاخِلَةً فِي سُلْطَانِ مَا فَوْقَهَا. And so God has made it so that there's min haqqi kulli wahidatin, that it's the duty of every single one of the faculties an takuna dakhilatan fi sultani ma fawqa, to be subservient to the faculty that is above it. Like, this is what he's saying, that just like in society, you want children that are obedient to their parents. You want students that that show respect to their elders. Respect to their elders. Which sometimes would mean obedience when it's appropriate. It doesn't mean you can't question things. You should if you have an intellect, you're an adult. But there's still decorum. There's still decorum. And so then he says, وَمُتَأَمِّرَةً عَلَى مَا دُونَهَا, and to be in command of what is beneath it, in that faculty, what is subservient to it. فَحَقَّ الْقُوَّةِ الشَّهْوِيَّةِ أَن تَكُونَ مُؤْتَمِرَةً لِلْقُوَّةِ الْغَضَبِيَّةِ. So it is the duty of the appetitive faculty to be subservient to the irascible faculty, the قُوَّةِ الْغَضَبِيَّةِ. Right? So in other words, the genitals and the stomach should be subservient to the thumos, the spirited nature of the chest, the heart. وَحَقَّ الْقُوَّةِ الْغَضَبِيَّةِ أَن تَكُونَ مُؤْتَمِرَةً لِلْقُوَّةِ الْعَاقِلَةِ. And it's the duty of the irascible soul to be in obedience to the rational soul, to the rational faculty. وَحَقَّ الْقُوَّةِ الْعَاقِلَةِ أَن تَكُونَ مُسْتَضِيئَةً بِنُورِ الشَّرْعِ. And it is the duty of the rational faculty to be illuminated by the light of sacred law. وَمُؤْتَمَرَةً لِمَرَاسِمِهِ. And in obedience to its dictates. حتى تصير هذه القوة متظاهرة غير متعادية. So that they're working in common cause. These faculties now are working in common cause. They're not in opposition to one another. They're working to help one another. متظاهرة. كما قال الله تعالى ونزعنا ما في صدورهم من غل إخوانا على سرر متقابلين. So he uses this istinbat. It's a beautiful istinbat of the idea of in paradise, when all of the resentment is removed from the hearts, they sit as in a fraternity on chairs facing, on couches facing one another. So what he's saying is that when you are properly ordered, when your soul is properly ordered, then these faculties will be in fraternity. They'll be helping one another, not hindering one another. And then he says, وَكَمَا لَا يَنْفَكُ أَشْرَارُ الْعَالَمِ مِنْ أَنْ يَطْلُبُ مِنَ الْعَالَمِ الْفَسَادِ. You can never be without a world that doesn't have evildoers that want to introduce corruption and trouble into the world. وَيُعَادُ الْأَخْيَارِ. And they will oppose the virtuous. كما قال الله تعالى وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَا فِي كُلِّ قَرْيَةٍ أَكَابِرَ مُجْرِمِيهَا لِيَمْكُرُوا فِيهَا. Just like that, we put in every city the big criminals